Hello friends, family, and internet strangers. Stephanie here with a new What's for Dinner video. This one is another one of trying to clean out my pantry, clean out my freezer, use what I have on hand, so everything in here is pretty budget friendly and very common ingredients being used here, so I hope y'all find some inspiration. Let's get right into it. First up, French onion pork chops and creamy garlic Parmesan rice. This was a really good meal. I had seen the garlic Parmesan rice on Valerie's channel over at Life with Valerie Rose. I will have her channel linked down below, as well as a link to the video where she made this. Now, I generally do not post my What's for Dinner videos the same week that I make the meals, mainly because I don't cook enough meals in 1 week to have a full video. So I am trying to cook more at home, but lately I've been making a lot of things that have leftovers. So I eat leftovers several days, even though I don't really like leftovers. I've been finding recipes where I like leftovers more and sticking to those ones. But this one, I only had 1 day of leftovers from this. I halved the recipe for the French onion chicken, and then I did have more leftovers of the rice, but I was able to use it with other meals, and the rice was really good leftover. So if y'all know how I do not like leftovers, just know that this rice does heat up again really well. So I started out with my caramelized onions first for my French onion pork chops. I loosely followed a recipe for those, and I will have that recipe linked down below. But I just wanted to get those started first, sauteing them in butter and a little bit of beef broth, and then I got started on the rice. So I started out with melted butter, garlic until it was fragrant, and then added in my washed rice. So I am just using white rice, and that was what I had on hand. And this probably could be done with brown rice as well, but your cooking time might be a little bit different. This was so good. I saw it on Valerie's channel and immediately made it the next day because I already had all of the ingredients on hand. So I am just adding all of the ingredients. I did use chicken broth. The recipe says you can use either chicken broth or water, so I chose to do the chicken bouillon with my water, as well as the heavy cream that goes into there. And then adding seasonings, which I didn't measure, I just kind of did to my heart's content, and that worked out pretty well for me. And while I'm doing this, I'm just going back and forth between taking care of my pork chops and taking care of my rice. So I caramelize onions with butter and a little bit of beef broth, and I just keep it going on the heat for a while. And so you can see once they get nice and brown over there, I am taking them out of this pan, and then I'm going to cook my pork in the same pan so it gets that nice caramelized onion flavor on it that it can absorb. So once I've got all of my onions out, the recipe calls for a thicker type of pork chop. I didn't have those on hand, but I did have the really thin cut pork chops on hand, so I just used those and it worked out fine. Y'all use what you have. I'm trying to get better about that myself, so definitely hoping y'all find some inspiration in my utilizing things and just altering recipes accordingly. So the main thing I altered in this recipe was just the cooking time of these pork chops was very fast because the pan was already hot and these were very thin pork chops. I didn't cook them all the way through right here just because I knew I was going to be cooking them further once they were in the sauce. So they were mostly cooked at this point, and then I pulled those out, added my onions back into the pan, and then started working on my sauce component here. But it was easier for me to just use the one dish, so I did that in the backwards order and just pulled them out afterwards. I'm all about saving dishes as much as possible. I hate doing dishes. It is one of my least favorite chores around my apartment, so dishes tend to pile up, especially during the work week. I get home from my last day of work for the week and just have a sink full of dishes. So I'm adding a little bit of flour into my onions so that I can start to make a gravy-like consistency. So I'm just cooking out that flour taste for just a minute or two, and then adding in some liquid there to grab all those good bits off the bottom of the pan. So I am scraping the bottom of the pan with my tongs here. That was just the easiest thing for me to cook with, was tongs. You can use whatever instrument, utensil you would like. And I am stirring in to make sure all of that flour gets combined with the liquid and the onions, and then adding my pork chops back in once this is a good consistency that I like. I let it come up to a boil. I added some pepper. I added a little bit of thyme as well, because when I get that French onion flavor, I like to have that thyme flavor. Really adds to it and makes it feel like I'm eating a French onion soup. So I add that in, I add my pork chops back in, and I make sure they're covered. So then they continue to finish cooking that last little bit in here. And then once those are all in, I'm gonna let those soak up that gravy, soak up those juices, and I'm gonna add some cheese onto them. I used provolone and Swiss cheese. You can use whatever cheese you prefer or have on hand for a French onion type recipe. So I get the sliced provolone from Aldi, and it is one of my favorite cheeses to use. I was never a big provolone fan until I started getting those slices from Aldi. And then I had grated up some Swiss cheese with my little Amazon grater and poured that on top. Put my pan in the oven. I had done this all in a Dutch oven, so it was oven friendly. Put it under the broiler just to get that cheese nice and melted. Now once my rice was cooked down, I added in the Parmesan cheese, a little bit of chopped fresh spinach, and then just stirring that to incorporate. And this, with the timing, I forgot to set a timer, but I just kind of assumed when everything else was ready, my rice would be too. So there is times listed on the recipe. I forgot to follow them, but this did turn out delicious, so I think it's okay. This is my final product with the pork chops, and this is the final product with the rice. I also had some asparagus, the frozen kind. I just put a little bit of my garlic herb butter spread over that and cooked that up in the microwave, and that was my meal that night. Next up is some Texas Roadhouse. I got takeout on one of my recent trips to Utah, and I got the cactus blossom, which is like the bloomin' onion for Texas Roadhouse, as well as a chicken Caesar salad. So this was on my most recent trip to Utah, but I've been getting very, very restless in LA, and at this point I just keep wanting to take road trips. So I've been to Utah several times in the past few months. One of those trips, which is not the one from this one, is one that I've posted recently. Now, my road trip videos are not the most popular on this channel, which I understand most people are here for the cooking content, but I really enjoy making them, so I'm gonna keep doing it even if they don't perform well. But I hope y'all will check out my road trip playlist if you haven't already, particularly my most recent one, which has a trip to Utah and a trip to Vegas. And now back to the regularly scheduled cooking content. Next up is really simple, just penne pasta with sauce and meatballs. I show this all the time on my channel, but I make my own sauce and I freeze it. I make my own meatballs and I freeze them. They thaw really easily. I just put a little bit of water in with the frozen sauce and put it on the stove if I haven't already taken it out to thaw. Sometimes if you know you're going to be making this, you can thaw in advance, but this night I said, I want pasta. And then I just took the stuff out of the freezer when I got home from work. And then I just put my meatballs in the microwave really quickly. I don't normally have sliced bread in my apartment, but I did this particular week, so I decided to use up some of my garlic herb butter from Land O'Lakes and then just spread that on some sliced bread, and I put it under the broiler for a couple minutes. And that was my easy garlic bread on this very unplanned night of dinner. I was really hungry, so I just had some of my leftover asparagus while everything was cooking, and then I just put that together in a bowl, and that's it. And I will have that linked down below, my homemade sauce and homemade meatballs. As usual, when I show that, I always link it down below. Next up, another night of I got home and went, I want mac and cheese. I don't have any Kraft mac and cheese, but I do have the ingredients to make my own mac and cheese. So all I'm doing right now is creating a roux right here. So that's going to be butter, and flour in about equal amounts, and then pouring in some water and stirring it until it is all well combined after that flour taste has kind of cooked out of the butter. So again, this is super simple, everything I already had on hand, so I was able to come home from work and just start cooking without a plan. So I had some cheese left over. I was not making any measurements. I was just doing this to what looked like it was going to be enough sauce and was going to taste good. So I do season my sauce when I make mac and cheese, and I use garlic powder, onion powder, salt, pepper, a little bit of paprika, and a little bit of cayenne. Those are my typical seasonings to use here. Or if I don't want to do salt and garlic powder, I'll just do garlic salt, which is what I did here. And I just season that until it tastes good and then add my cheese. I had a bowl of grated cheddar cheese that was left over from a previous recipe and just added this in small amounts. I find it melts easier that way than if you dump the entire thing in. In addition to my cheddar, this also had a little bit of Swiss mixed in that was left over from the first recipe of this video, that French onion pork chops. So using up all those ingredients and getting them out of my refrigerator. And then I gave this a taste, and it needed a little bit more cream, so I added some heavy cream in addition to the milk that I had already put in there, and that gave it this really nice, smooth, creamy consistency, even with just a little bit. So again, I don't have a recipe for this. This is just all winging it. This is leftover pasta from when I had done my penne with meatballs and sauce, because I didn't feel like doing only a small portion of the box, so I had about half a box left. I did the entire thing, used half of it with my little bit of sauce that was left and half of it with this. And then I had steamable broccoli. I just put that in the microwave and cooked it according to the package directions, and then added it into my pasta, stirring it up as I go. I wasn't sure originally if I wanted to use the entire thing or not, but I decided, I'll be a little healthier. I'll have a good portion of broccoli to penne ratio, and then this created leftovers. And not all mac and cheese heats up well. This mac and cheese does reheat well, so I do recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.